Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, folks in the audience. It's always good when folks show up because I know at least the message got out. But yeah, so good evening and welcome to the second public meeting for the West Lacy Reconstruction Project. I know folks will kind of be joining, as we go and certainly online. So, but today we'll be talking about the roadway project and from Fitchburg to Seminole, but not including the intersections. And then we'll also be talking about the Lacy and Seminole intersection reconstruction project in kind of a two-parter. And so I know we'll have some folks in the council chambers, also via Zoom, and some watching at home. So thank you so much for showing up. We don't have the group chat functionality turned on. So if you're, kind of as we go, if you have clarifying questions, please feel free to raise your hand, either virtually or in the audience, and I can answer those as we go. Otherwise, we'll kind of cover the project material first and then open it up for question, and then we'll dive into the intersection control at Seminole and Lacy and then open up for questions. So with that, I might give it just a couple seconds for folks to join because I know it's always tough to join right at 5:30. So I might just pause briefly. Okay. So I'll start sharing my screen. And I guess for this format, primarily I'll just kind of run through a presentation, but then we'll also jump into kind of the exhibit and we can walk through that as well. So. Okay, yeah. Scott, is that something we can do? Sorry. Oh. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so diving into the agenda. So we're going to go through the background on the roadway project, kind of talk through the modified design, hit the questions and answers, and then hit the intersection control options, and then do questions and answers. And so just so everybody's kind of on the same page, this is kind of how we represented the project back in February. And so we have the roadway project, and so that really goes from just east of Fitchburg Road through to kind of the Badger State Trail. Right now, previously we were extending it a little bit less. And then the intersection project kind of picks up where that leaves off and gets on the legs of Seminole and Lacy. And so just, make sure we're all on the same page in case folks, didn't attend the first one. So, why improve? So we're addressing some existing and long-term operational and safety needs. We're trying to make sure we're growing with the development out there and providing a road that can facilitate growth. And then we're also trying to connect some discontinuous pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And so, through the council action, kind of specifying on-street bike facilities and the shared use path, we've definitely included that. And now we're kind of moving ahead with the design and kind of laying out and see the nuances. So, and that kind of shows, we have the Military Ridge, we have the Badger State Trail, and now we're now connecting that with some additional facilities. So the first time we met back in February, and also some subsequent surveys, and then follow-up work through council and through different resolutions, we heard a lot of concern about mature tree loss and project cost. And so the project team took that and kind of went back to the drawing board. We had some very specific kind of areas that I'll get to in a little bit. But this kind of shows so far kind of the progress we've made from that initial February public meeting with medians included in a much larger share. wider travel lanes, sidewalk on the south side. And so now we've kind of trimmed that back, smaller travel lanes, really only one median on the corridor, one raised median, and removed the I guess, at least the project component of the sidewalk. So that's kind of what we are moving forward with. And sorry, I did forget to introduce my team. I do have Dan Ryan here. He's going to cover kind of the traffic questions as they come up. And we also have Ryan, who's going to be covering more of the stormwater, road, general roadway design. Those two kind of work together to update our plan set after we receive direction from the council. So these were really the developed. We developed some priority areas with a small group. We met quite a few times, just a group of 8 or so residents on the corridor, to kind of hone in on what specific things we should be looking at. And so this is kind of a short list, but definitely tree preservation at the quarry / Commerce, Commerce Park Drive. Oh, sure. Okay. I just got a note from Scott. If you do have questions, as we go, just raise your hand, feel free. But also when we do Q&A, you can come up to the table there. But so really, that was, so this is, in the center, just to kind of go back. So this is kind of in this area. And so the direction was, trying to reduce the cross section here and try to minimize kind of the intersection or the grading limits to save as many trees as possible. And so that was the first. Then we also had the Quarry Ridge and South Axis alignment. So that's that goes hand in hand in that same area. There's also a hope to try to save the trees. There's roughly 10 trees about 900 feet west of the Badger State Trail. That's in about this area. And so we also looked into that. There was a hope for relocating some trees to donor areas. There's also a hope to use the existing tree survey that we collected to specify the number of trees, the species, and potentially some clustering. And, there was a hope for permeable pavement to reduce some of the stormwater effects in an area that's has some regional stormwater concerns. And then there's also kind of a raised versus surface level medians raised. And so those were kind of the key areas I passed on to the design team to focus on as we started to redesign with the new cross-section. And so I can just kind of run through each of these for now, and then we can pull up the full exhibit and just kind of walk through it. But so, unfortunately, we weren't able to align the driveways at this time. So if I just kind of, so we have 2 driveways. We have one down here, the Hammersley Quarry on the south side, kind of where the Wayne station this is, and then on the north side, kind of the full quarry entrance. And so, the original plan was to line up. So we're looking kind of northeast on the corridor in this area. And so the original hope was to line these 2 up, to reduce the kind of truck movement kind of back and forth between these 2. Unfortunately, as this slide indicates, we weren't able to do that. Basically, the landowners don't own, no landowner owns all the land to be able to do that. And so kind of the short-term design is to basically create this 2-way left turn lane that trucks can jump into and kind of wait, so they can kind of make 2-stage crossings and then kind of merge over and get over there. And so that, we felt like that would create a safer kind of transition for trucks, and so they can do that both ways. And then in the future, we do have a future plan connection once kind of development occurs on both parcels on the south, that we could actually have this driveway line up with the driveway on the north to create a new intersection, and then these left turn lanes would just turn into intersection left turn lanes. And so that will make a little bit more sense when I jump into the exhibit, but unfortunately, we weren't able to line those up, and because of that, just from some of the grades, this is such a steep driveway here that we basically weren't able to raise this as much as we were before. And so that means because this roadway profile is dropping more, we have to go further up as a cut to get that 2.5 to 1 slope. And so, unfortunately, that basically results in a larger cut area here. And that was just kind of that wasn't anything that the project team did. That was just kind of we had hoped that this would work out before, that these driveways would line up and everything would work out. The fact that it didn't now means that we've had to make some updates. And so along with that, so basically it drops the roadway, increases the cut on the north side, and leads to some additional tree loss on the north side. But I'll mention, you can really see, I think this picture does a lot. So these are all existing trees out there. And what this shows is, there's a huge density of trees right along the existing roadway on the north side. As you go further up the slope, there's less and less kind of mature, 6-inch or greater diameter trees. There's a lot of undergrowth and foliage in there, but so we don't feel like it makes a drastic impact. And I'll know from a character perspective, it's much further away from the roadway. So adding 5 more feet up here, you're not really going to see it from the roadway. Having said all that, the mitigation is we are doubling the number of trees that we're required to plant. So I know not mature trees, but we're trying to compensate by really trying to overdo the new trees that we're putting in. And so that was just kind of an unfortunate update. Again, nothing that we tried to do, just a previous assumption that these driveways were going to work out fell through. So the next, just from kind of one item that came up was, well, what about putting a retaining wall in here? So you'd be putting a retaining wall up here, on the other side of the path, on the north side here. That would potentially raise this line, and so you could level this out faster and not have to kill as many trees on the north side. And so that was definitely an option that we looked at. I just want to kind of present this quickly. So cut is basically when we're lowering the elevation of the roadway, compared to the existing, whereas fill is kind of increasing compared to the existing. And so this shows that, so online when you look at some of these plan and profile sheets, so and you can kind of check this out on the online version, but so we have basically the existing profile and the proposed. And so every time we make a cut, that's removing that soil, and we have to find a place to put that. And then every time we have a fill, we have to borrow soil and put it somewhere. And so generally we try to balance that, and the project is currently balanced. And so we don't really have a whole lot of savings. Before we were thinking that if we were to put up a retaining wall here, we could get some savings from not having all that cut and excess material to get rid of and haul away off site. Now we don't have that assumption anymore. So basically the retaining wall has no savings. It would just be additional cost. And so we're still looking at a small retaining wall as a possibility on the west side of the quarry access. I haven't confirmed that yet, but right now we're just going to assume kind of the worst case scenario on the transportation project plat, which comes next, in terms of right-of-way acquisition. And then hopefully we can work out something that would shrink that. But we just want to make sure we're moving forward with kind of the worst case scenario. So, and so so these are some of the options that we presented to council. So basically, for Fish Hatchery Road, we used 2 different types of retaining walls, a modular block, which WISDOT generally recommends up to 8 feet, although they have been used higher than that, and then a soldier pile wall that can go up to 28 feet. In either case, really we'd be talking about 20 feet of fill. We were kind of thinking, well, what's a reasonable thing if we just cut that in half? We have about 11 feet on average. It varies from roughly 6 feet of fill to 20 feet of fill. And so if we just kind of cut that in half and kind of had that as a general average, that would be about $1 million. And so this is a $6 million project. That's a considerable cost. And at this time, the project team feels like it's the benefits of kind of the periphery trees, 60 or so feet away from the roadway, don't outweigh that cost. And so right now we don't have this 1,000-foot wall in that stretch, just from a cost savings measure. Because I know it's tough. We both want to save the trees and save money, and in this case, they're kind of at odds with each other. So the fact that we're planting more new trees seems like that's a better deal at this point. So that's kind of where we've left off with that. But on the positive note, we did want to focus a little bit more on the trees that are closer to the roadway that we could save. And so these trees, about 900 feet west of the Badger State Trail, there are roughly 10 trees there, mainly bur oak. The south side trees were pretty severely damaged from overhead power lines. And so we felt like the north side trees were really the best, most important to save. We have 4 bur oak and 1 black cherry. And we plan to save the majority of those and plant new trees in that area as well. And so I can definitely show you that. So this is that area. So you can see, so these look a lot better than they are. Again, this is just a rendering. So we have these 5 on the north side. And so you can see at least one of these is going to be in the roadway surface. And so we're probably going to, optimistically, we can save 3, but we'll probably end up saving these 2. And then the idea would be to plant some additional trees in here to kind of create a grove. Again, so there'd be some natural kind of lateral offsetting. So we're trying to preserve the character as best we can, knowing that these were built fairly close to the road. We're also working with Edgewood development. These left turn lanes were kind of designed for that anticipated capacity of an event space down here, kind of a recreational event space. And so we're working with them to see if perhaps they could be reduced in size and maybe not go as far west, and that might give us more options as far as saving this growth. So that's definitely a lot better news, and we are going through a considerable effort to this area is very flat, and trying to get wastewater or stormwater to drain has been a considerable challenge, and it's led to a lot of rework. And so I'm very happy that our consultant team put in the work to try to make sure this could happen. And so what you see behind there is so bioretention area, and then kind of a wet pond to capture the stormwater that's coming off the Commerce Park Hill, coming down and going before it gets into the kettle eventually. So there's a lot of stormwater implications around here, and so I think this turned out really well. And so that's, I think, a win from our perspective. So another priority area was relocating some of the existing trees to donor areas. Unfortunately, this proved to kind of not be much of a viable option, mainly because kind of transplanting is generally costly without a very good chance of survival. It's kind of a different contractor versus what an arborist or a tree farm would be. And then we also had the issue of not really having a donee site on site in the project limits, because everything's going to be torn up. And so we had kind of talked a little bit about potentially moving them to Commerce Park Drive, but really, we'd be planting new trees there anyway, so there wouldn't be a kind of a net gain of trees. And so with that, it's just not a viable option within the kind of project limits. Oops, sorry. So the new tree, kind of the tree number, species, and clustering, as I mentioned, so we're required to put them at 80 feet spacing along the corridor. We've moved that up to 40-foot spacing, and I'll note that we are clustering them, and so they might not be every 40 feet, but there's going to be kind of on average a tree every 40 feet. And so we used a similar technique the design team did on Fayette Glen. And so really we're just trying to get a more naturalistic look. And so in this case, the project doubled the number of trees, and we will be using the tree survey to inform the tree species, as well as just the general catalog of Fitchburg street trees. So. And then I'll mention, there was a hope for permeable pavement. We're definitely looking into that option, especially for the east end where we have relatively flat path pavement. Those usually work best in flat areas because you have a lot more ponding. And so basically we build a storm reservoir. There's already some existing permeable pavement path out at Corey Vista. And so basically it drains through the asphalt. It's a porous asphalt. It doesn't have the fines in it. And then it goes into a stone reservoir, and that fills up and kind of stores that until it eventually drains. And so we're definitely looking at that. to offset some of our impervious service. And then there's also some benefits and costs in here that I'm happy to include in the PowerPoint, but I won't go through all of them. And then raised versus surface level medians. So I'll note that we did have several raised medians in the initial plan. In an effort to kind of reduce costs and the size of the footprint, we removed many of them and are left with 2 pedestrian refuge islands at Rock Ridge. And so we have removed many of them. We have some painted islands and some twiddles, or two-way left turn lanes. And so with that, I will jump into the actual exhibit. And we'll just I just want to make sure, I'll run through it quickly, and then we can kind of open up for questions. But I just want to make sure everybody sees it, because I know when I'm referencing it, it seems fine to me, but I've looked at it a lot more. So, okay, so we'll start on the west end. Okay. So as you can see here, so this orange is the storm sewer, and so as that gets to the western limits of the project, it will dive onto an easement into our detention pond on kind of the south end below these properties, and so it'll be down here. And then as we move further east, you'll note the islands I spoke about, so these will be raised pedestrian refuge islands at Rock Ridge. There is a planned development here to connect into Rock Ridge. That will be, so basically the Fitchburg Minerals site will connect into this, and we'll be coordinating with them as our plan progresses. And so as we move further east, so this is all the existing path, and then we start picking up the newly proposed path. So right now there's a road closed sign here, and that'll be continuing. And so this is where those 2 axes are that I spoke about in kind of the isometric view. And so this being so low, we had to kind of lower the road elevation to match into that, to not make this driveway too steep for the low boys to get out of. We added this 2-way left turn lane for trucks to be able to do this movement safely. And then in the future condition, when this becomes, so you can see this is a separate parcel, when all of this becomes redeveloped and there is a access road connecting into this development, then these will be left turn lanes into those developments. And so you can see, so basically on this diagram that's online, you can kind of check it out. We have the elevation on here, so you can see kind of what the grading limits go up to. So these are all the trees that we surveyed. And as I mentioned, there's quite a higher density along the roadway. As you get further up, they become sparser. Though there's still quite a few in there, and we realize that we're having to regrade and remove those. We do have the potential to save some of these trees again. So these are spruce against the roadway. That's still to be determined depending upon what our grading limits are. But as I move further east, we get to kind of the limits here. So I'll scroll down. And so now we get to Commerce Park Drive, and so this is where we have left turn lanes into Commerce Park, so that we're not delaying folks driving through. We have a right turn bay, again, for the same logic. Along this, this is really where the storm sewer, where the sanitary picks up, east of here. And you'll note that there is water main along this stretch underneath the path. And so, again, this orange picks up as we start to get storm sewer inlets in here. And then as I move further east, this is where the storm sewer discharges into a wet pond, and then a bioretention here. And then as we move down the hill into this stretch, we start to widen out for these left turn bays adjacent to the proposed, so currently O'Brien plat proposed Edgewood development. And so Again, like I mentioned, this is still ongoing, but you can see that what we've done so far is to basically move the path out to be able to give these trees some more space, and to be able to plant some more trees, create a little grove and a little bit more of a naturalistic setting. So, and then we move that back in, and we kind of continue this through to the path. And I'll note that everything east here in the path is very preliminary. It's not included in the roadway project, but is instead included in the intersection project. And so this kind of whole thing I'll be talking about in a little bit, but we just wanted to carry it through for continuity so that folks kind of see the whole thing together. We still have to determine what this control is, but we'd be doing, we'd basically be kind of shifting this into a raised median island at the Badger State Trail to provide trail users a two-stage crossing. That we know. We don't know much else about the east side. So, and with that, I think, we kind of walked through everything. I'm happy to open it up for questions. I don't see any.
And Andrew, Dave Herbst here.
Oh,
So what does that, how does that affect the overall cost, compared to the estimate the day we approved the design?
yeah, so what we're looking at right now is about $6,150,000, and so that's roughly 4% higher than the 5.9 million that we quoted. Basically with the smallest reduction, basically the 28-foot roadway. And so some of that cost came from this path relocation. Some of that cost came from going back to a 32-foot roadway. And so currently that's kind of where we're at. So we're a little bit higher, but still lower than what we were at the onset of this project, when we were, I believe, at I can pull it up, 6.35 million.
Thank you.
Yep. And Ryan, if you have any other updates you want to throw in for project cost, feel free. Let me know if I didn't summarize that correctly.
Nope, you got it right.
Awesome. Cool. I think we had a question in the audience here. If you want to come up to the table.
Hi. Could you show the Commerce Park intersection again?
Yep. There you go.
Okay. Is that trail crossing there, is that a raised crossing to prevent cars turning northbound from the east, from running into pedestrians or cyclists who are on that trail?
That's a great question. Right now, it's not designed as that. It would be just kind of a traditional ramp with a, surface level painted crosswalk. That's definitely something we could look at.
I just feel like the trail, the trail users are on a straight path, and it seems like they ought to have the right of way, and the right turn, from the east ought to yield, but I'm not sure how you make that happen without, the infrastructure imposing that on the driver.
Right. We do have a little bit of an offset there that we, typically try to have just so that, there's some space for the right turn. And the fact that we have left and right turn bays make that there's considerable less back pressure basically from the through vehicles. So folks, are a little bit more patient if they see that. But we can definitely look at that a little bit more closely to see if there's anything else we could do, like a raised crossing, to make it a little bit more comfortable for the cyclist.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And Ryan, or sorry, Dan, if you have any other comments there, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, the only thing we might do, we're considering the green friction paint that you've seen at Fitchburg Road, and that's also an option to highlight that crossing.
It's a little tough to hear you, and there's kind of, your booming voice in here, sorry.
Yeah, no, one of the things that we're looking at is adding the green friction paint to the trail crossings across the road. So that would highlight that crossing out the drivers.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. I kind of got it. Dan, could you just say that one more time? I don't want to misquote you.
Yeah, one of the things we're still considering is the use of green friction paint across the crossing that you've seen already done out on Fitchburg Road to highlight that crossing for the bikes and pedestrians, to highlight for the drivers.
Thanks, Dan. Yep, got it that time. So yeah, green friction paint, similar up at McKee, and we will be using that more on Fish. So, okay, cool. Any other questions in the audience or at home? Okay. Hearing none, I think that's a cue. I think we can probably move on to the intersection. And so I can pull that up. But yeah, feel free to stop me if I didn't see your hand go up and anybody has comments. Yeah, and I did just want to mention for either the intersection or the roadway project, we do have a link online. If you can't write this all down right now or nice to take pictures, we'll have that up on the website as well. So, but yeah, basically just a couple simple questions just to make sure, after you get back to your home and have time to really digest the plan set. If you have any more questions or comments, feel free to either email me, my contact information is on the website, or feel free to put in the survey. So, with that, I'll jump over to Lacy Broad. And so we presented this at the original public meeting and got definitely some great feedback. But overall, I think folks were leaning towards roundabout, but that we definitely had some great points on either side for a traffic signal as well. So we presented this to council so we basically approved a design contract to get this going. Within that resolution, we included a staff recommended option. And we had some great debate, but council felt like we should probably go back one more time out to the public just to make sure folks have a chance to weigh in. And so here we are doing that. And so, I'll kind of present. So this is the existing conditions. We got these turning movement counts. So just to kind of orientate folks, the first number here is the AM peak hour, basically a peak hour count. So 284 vehicles did this right turn movement in the AM peak back in March of 2020. And then in parentheses, that's the PM peak hour. So 92 did that. So definitely, we're seeing in the AM a lot of folks are making this right turn. In the PM, a lot of folks are coming back and making this left turn. Those are the primary movements here. We also certainly have some through movements on Lacy as well. And so that was kind of the existing conditions. You'll note that those counts took place a while back, but unfortunately we weren't able to get very reliable counts this year yet. So we're kind of sticking with those counts. And so really there's two new alternatives. There's the existing all-way cross or all-way stop. And then the two new alternatives would be a traffic signal and a roundabout. And so I'll note these are kind of just kind of a high level. So currently the traffic signal includes left turn lanes in all directions and a right turn lane to accommodate that westbound Lacy Road movement. Currently, right now, in the diagram and in the cost estimate, we include a right turn bypass. We will likely remove that just based upon some concerns from pedestrian and bicyclists, about that creating, maybe a limited limited pros with the potential con of some increased conflict. So we'd be removing that, but right now this cost estimate still includes that. And so basically the construction plus right-of-way cost would be something like 2.5 million. And for the roundabout and for the traffic signal would be something like 2.75 million. And that's right now just kind of based on high-level cost estimates. We're still in preliminary design, so we haven't gotten through that, but that's kind of, you can see they're roughly the same. The traffic signal will cost a little bit more. And I'll note that the limits of the kind of functional area of these two intersections are different, and I'll kind of go through that. So the roundabout has, if we summed up basically all these road legs, we get roughly 2,000 feet of roadway pavement, or of kind of linear pavement. The signal goes out a little bit farther, and that's just to get those kind of transition tapers back. And so we're picking up a little bit more roadway in the signal alternative, roughly 900 feet more. And so that some of that kind of bears out in the cost. So they're very similarly cost, with the signal being slightly higher. And that's really just because, we're going to repave these roads anyway. And so there's a little bit of reduction in cost, for the city at large with the signal. But I would say the signal certainly has the ongoing annual maintenance cost of, keeping the lights on, going out there to fix timing, to fix burnout bulbs, to fix malfunction equipment. So it certainly has that. And then I'll just kind of note quickly, so we compared, using the existing volumes, we compared what the intersection level service would be. That's the LOS you're seeing here. And that's basically just, an A through F scale, A being the best, F being, failing. And so what you can see here is under existing conditions, all of these options operate acceptably. So, with the existing currently seeing something like, 17 seconds of average delay in the kind of worst 15 minutes during the day. And so, under existing conditions, they all work. We did look at some future conditions, and so we got some forecasts from the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, to get some future volumes. We ran the operation analysis again with those volumes, and we started to see level service D. So really starting to get that borderline on the existing condition, or on the kind of existing traffic control of the always stop control. So that's what AWSC means. And really, we're not seeing a whole lot of difference between a traffic signal and a roundabout in terms of peak operations. I did just want to offer this. So we had we recently had another intersection, Nesbitt and Fitchburg, and just kind of give you a quick baseline. So this is kind of the base year traffic conditions. And so we had much greater queuing at Nesbitt and Fitchburg prior to the roundabout. We really don't have as big a problem right now, and we don't anticipate as big a problem in the future. And so really I just kind of want to de-emphasize the operations a little bit, that all these options will work. It's really just kind of what's best and what's consistent with the rest of the area, and some of those other more nuanced characteristics. And so with that, we did also do a sensitivity analysis and looked at, really how much additional traffic, if we just increased it all uniformly, all the alternative movement counts uniformly, what additional capacity was left in those intersections before we started seeing some of those failing movements. And so you can see, the always stop control doesn't have quite as much capacity. It's working right now. It's going to still be working in 2041, but it really has not much else. It can't really keep going after that. Whereas the traffic signal and the roundabout really have a good amount in both the AM and PM peak hours of additional capacity. And so that's really, I've heard say that always stop control, is really kind of, the next 20 years, and then kind of becomes less of an option. So you could do always stop control to a traffic signal, but really traffic signal and roundabout are the clearest options long-term right now. And so with that, there's plenty of pros and cons. So alternative zero, stick with what you got and just resurface or rebuild. So certainly lower cost, and and less out of direction travel for bikes and pedestrians. But really, the con is it's really, it's a short-term fix, and it has little spare capacity to spare. So, and there's also some discomfort for bikes and pedestrians depending upon the yielding compliance. Out there, it really depends. I know, the current conditions, it depends during what time you get out there, but sometimes it's harder to get through, cross there versus other times. So. The traffic signal, certainly higher spare capacity, less out of direction travel for bikes and peds, but it comes with that highest cost and longer wait for bikes and peds. Even with a shorter cycle, this being kind of an isolated intersection, even with a 60-second cycle or something like that, you'd still be waiting, up to, that kind of a good share of that 60 seconds to cross potentially. So, that certainly is a downside from the signal perspective. You get that guaranteed cross, but you probably have to wait for it. Whereas with the roundabout, the pros certainly lower cost in the signal. Bikes and pedestrians cross one direction at a time, and then there's definitely some lower right angle collisions. So I think that's, from a safety perspective, long term we're looking at kind of lowest crash risk for either the roundabout or potentially the all-way stop. And we certainly see less right angle collisions with the roundabout just because folks, there's going to be more side swipes, more rear ends potentially versus the existing conditions, but there's definitely going to be less of those kind of head-on and T-bone type of collisions because everybody's kind of circulating in the same direction. But some of the cons, to be fair, is that it is difficult crossing for pedestrians with visual impairments. It's hard to judge a gap when you have to kind of negotiate if they're going to stop for you. And there's no emergency vehicle preemption. I'll note that certainly with the lights on and flashing, fire trucks, and we'll design it for fire trucks to get through there pretty easily. But we don't have emergency preemption like we do with signals to just let them have green. So. And then I'll note, we talked a little bit about the trail crossing with the roadway project, so we are thinking about something like this Z crossing, just to kind of break up the two crossings. So just to kind of dive into that a little bit more. So basically pedestrians and bicyclists, the trail users, can cross one direction for eastbound traffic and then kind of wait and check the other side and then cross the other directions and vice versa. We're certainly looking at putting a rapid rectangular flashing beacon here. We will also be considering what the west side crosswalk looks like, if that's needed when we have this crossing nearby. That would be another kind of area to look into. But we're certainly looking at more of an enhanced crossing of the Badger State Trail to make it more visible for your trail users in any option we choose. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions. And yeah, feel free to either raise your hand digitally or in person. And I can stop sharing my screen. Yeah, sure. And then we'll hit Tim. I'll see you next.
I'll ask kind of the same question I did before. Is there any thought towards making the Badger State Trail crossing there a raised crossing to prevent cars from traveling across the BST at high speed?
Right. I would say there's less options for this particular crossing just because that's the through movement versus in the other condition, folks are stopping anyway. And so, that's certainly something we could look at. I know there's definitely some examples in residential areas in Fitchburg where we have that condition, where we have a raised crossing for folks, basically like a speed hump at a crossing. And that's great, and it slows folks down and definitely increases compliance. It just might be unexpected in a kind of urban collector like Lacy is. And so that might be tricky. Certainly there's other enhancements, as Dan mentioned, the green paint, the rapid rectangular flashing beacon, the pedestrian refuge island. I think there's other things like that we can look at. I don't think we'll be looking quite as closely over a raised crossing in this location just because it comes with that concern that won't be expected. We have lots of truck traffic through here. We want to make sure we're not, getting somebody going too fast and then go off of that. So, and I'm happy to work through that a little bit more, but
Yeah, and maybe you can talk about the distance between the intersection and the Badger State Trail. Are people already decelerating at that point, and
Right.
how much acceleration have they had by that point? Because
yep.
that's going to play into it, obviously.
And it's definitely dependent upon the intersection control options, because one thing I didn't mention in this presentation, but we've mentioned previously, is that a signalized intersection would potentially maintain faster speeds directly adjacent to the intersection for Lacy and the associated trail crossing. And so that's definitely a potential safety concern versus a roundabout would slow folks down because they're naturally having to go through a roundabout, especially coming out of the roundabout into the Badger State Trail crossing. So I would definitely anticipate slower speeds with the roundabout option, and then so that being maybe less of a concern about slowing folks down at the crossing. I think from a signal perspective, that would be very atypical to have a raised crossing like that with a traffic signal. So I think those are just kind of the things that we're going to have to, it sounds like a great idea, and there's definitely a ton of bike traffic there. I know that's one of the highest crossing, as far as bikes and peds in the city. So we're definitely cognizant of that. I just don't know if we can do a race crossing there, I guess.
Yeah. Again, I just want to remind everybody that cars do not bounce off of paint.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Awesome. Thank you. Tim, I think you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. One quick question. I appreciate the traffic data and the information and extrapolations explaining the intersection, but I didn't see any data related to bicycle or pedestrian utilization. And have been questioning, I guess, since the earlier editions of this, of why so much paved space for bicycles and pedestrians with no data.
And is this in reference to the roadway, the intersection, or both?
Well, roadway and the multi-use trail.
Okay, sure.
Just trying to understand if that'll be really utilized and where that data to make the decision that much was needed came from.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's always tough, especially, when you don't have those facilities to gauge how many folks will show up when you build them. And so, really, I think the decision through kind of the cross-section, and, specifically in relation to the on-street bike facilities, in addition to the shared use path, as that worked through kind of council and preferred cross-section, I think the real intention is that we're giving different facilities for different user types. So folks that are comfortable using on-street facilities, have a nice buffered bike lane, that they can continue on street and go through there at potentially higher speeds than folks that would be using the path. And folks that aren't comfortable right on street, they certainly have the shared use path. So it's hard to say. Again, we don't have a great facility right now. It's pretty narrow lanes, a rural roadway. So I would definitely anticipate higher volumes than what we see right now along the roadway. I will say there's definitely a lot of traffic on the Badger State Trail, and we know we also have a lot of traffic on the Military Ridge. So connecting those two has a high potential, but we won't really know until we build it. And so, but most of that decision as far as those two linear facilities has already been made as part of the council action on the cross section. And so now we're just kind of designing that. As far as the roundabout or signal and what happens in the trail, that's still kind of to be determined and kind of that nuance that we're working through now. So, but yeah, happy to take questions and comments on that, both now and in the survey, to work through that.
Yeah, my concern is I'm familiar, I ride around the Sun Prairie area, and Sun Prairie has a lot of trails that they've installed over the years, and they have some highly utilized sections of multi-use paths, like the section along Highway 19, just south of Highway 19, out on the west end of town. But they also have some sections where they put in multi-use paths with bicycle accommodations on the roadway that are completely underutilized. They really were wasteful. And I guess that's the concern. It seems like there's been a lot of due diligence done here, looking at the intersection, the road, for the automobile traffic, but almost none other than somebody waving hands and saying if we build it, they will come for the bicycle pedestrian. So I just wanted to get that out there. And then the other question, being a landowner on that side of the road, who's going to be responsible for maintaining that multi-use? What's the plan for snow removal, things like that? Just going to let it stay snowed over? Is the city going to handle that or what?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think typically for Sherry's Paths, the city plows those. And so, that would be, certainly something we'd be looking at, as well as, the permeable pavement that we'd be looking at, sweeping that out twice a year, just to kind of maintain its porosity. So yeah, that would be, as far as right now, the plan would be that would be maintained by city forces. Whereas sidewalk, as development occurs on the south side, as sidewalk goes in, that would still be on, the development's responsibility.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I guess one last question, drainage. Quite familiar with the area. I grew up there, so 1.5 century familiar with the area. That section of Lacy Road is kind of a water stop over there. Right around the Badger Trail. Is there a plan, or you think the permeable pavement along with the retention basin further west is going to handle what comes through there?
Yeah, so, really our facilities, so I can only speak to the roadway project right now, and kind of in the greater context of there being kind of some regional stormwater facility talk. And so some of that's included in our design, but right now, kind of what we show as far as the stormwater, the best management practices that we have included in the plan set is really just trying to treat the roadway stormwater. And so we have some, new impervious surface that will generate runoff, and so we'll be treating that, as well as some, basically there's a 100% infiltration requirement, and so we'll be kind of treating the water on the roadway. As far as kind of the more regional, yeah, as you mentioned, kettle hopping right from the kettle on the north side to the south side, and kind of just the general area in there. That'll be, we have a small portion of KL's scope to look into kind of a more regionally significant infiltration area, potentially, west of the Badger State Trail in that area. But, we won't, as part of the roadway project, we won't be kind of fixing all the stormwater issues. We'll just be treating the new ones we generate, if that makes sense.
Understood. I guess my comment would be I'd strongly urge you and the other technical folks to go back to the council and the mayor and push them to take a holistic view. Not saying it all has to be done at the same time, but whether they like it or not, these pieces are all connected with springs and elastic bands. You do stuff in the roadway, you're going to have to live with those decisions in the future if you decide to deal with the stormwater.
Sure. And Brian, do you want to jump in and say anything else? Did I butcher that? Sorry.
No, I think you nailed it on the head there. The neighborhood plan, that was the study that had been done kind of for this whole area, had imposed that 100% infiltration requirements for all developments, and usually roads have kind of a way out, but they have been, as part of that neighborhood plan, there was a no roads exemption, so that we are having to do our infiltration for those roads. But yes, you're right, there's definitely a larger regional view, and we've been working with the city because they had also done a study last year on the kind of the kettle there, and going as part of the roundabout project, looking at some of those, doing some more preliminary design for some of the alternatives they had scoped out as part of that study.
Very good. Thank you for your time. Just feel it would be good to have a plan for that water in addition to these road and intersection upgrades. That's all I had for you this evening, gentlemen.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And we appreciate, I'm sure we'll be working more with you. So.
Yep.
And any other questions? Folks in the audience here or online? Yeah, if you want to come up, just so everybody can hear it. Thanks.
At this point, has there been a strong preference toward either the traffic signal or the roundabout? I mean, I know you're showing both options, but
Yeah.
has there been strong preference or outcry against one or the other of those?
Sure. So I would say, definitely good points made on both a signal and roundabout's behalf. It's staff's preferred option to do a roundabout, mainly from a traffic calming perspective, that being so close to the Badger State Trail, lower operating costs, and generally a lower delay throughout the non-peak times throughout the day. And so that, just for those reasons, we kind of felt like that outweighed
Okay.
some of the benefits of a traffic signal. But we want to make sure if there was any other folks
Okay.
who really want a traffic signal in this area, we
Okay.
heard from them. So.
So for safety and efficiency of traffic movement, as well as for environmental impact, I would imagine the roundabout would be better because you're not going to force so many people to sit and idle while they wait for their turn to go.
Yeah, generally, especially during those off-peak times, that would be
Yeah.
where we would see the potential reductions in fuel use and particulate
Okay.
matter emissions.
Could you show the roundabout again? Because I'm interested in what that right turn that bypasses the roundabout
Sure.
is, what that would do to pedestrians or bikes trying to get through that intersection.
And I'll note, I mentioned fleeting before, but so, this was kind of our preliminary design with that right turn bypass, and that's how we've currently scoped the project cost. But I certainly have the direction to the consultant to remove that if this was the chosen option.
Okay.
It doesn't add a whole lot of benefits as far as operational, benefits for those westbound right turners because they still have to merge into one lane going northbound. There's a little bit, but I don't feel like the benefits outweigh the cost. So.
Okay, and removing that will just decrease the cost of the roundabout rather than anything
Yep.
else. Okay, great.
Awesome. Any other questions, both here in the audience and at home? Okay. Awesome. Well, I will share my screen one more time and just pop open that link for folks at home and in the audience if you, whoops. So this is the link here. I'll also pop open the website. And so, we're going to be, basically from a project schedule perspective, we are going to be, making some of these edits and kind of getting comments back to the consultant next week, and then they're going to be incorporating that feedback and then getting it into a transportation project plat. And so if you go to Lacy Broad, so obviously it pops up for me very easily, but if you go on the website under government departments, public works, engineering, construction, and Lacy Road, there's lots of information on here, including the link. And really this last one right here is the updated plan set. We also have some of the alternatives, for the intersection control alternatives. And then I'll be adding the slides in here as well, so you have access to that. And so I'll also be adding the survey link in here, just so we have it in two places. So, feel free, yes, please get on here and let us know. We have roughly a week and a half to basically get all these comments back to the consultant so that we can come back to council with a transportation project plat. And that's really where we solidify kind of what right-of-way we need before moving on to the final plans. And so I really appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for showing up. And, it doesn't stop here. Feel free to comment more, and we'll get that to the design consultants. But thank you.